Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Um, this is the second talk exploring the epistemic and the ontological consequences of colonization on Gurmat through the encounter with the British. And it's really decolonizing consciousness through Gurmat, and it is enabling us to recognize really what do we mean by mysticism. So in this particular talk, I think really what I'm going to focus on is trying to unpack this word mystic, mysticism, and ontology to try and provide a proper, easy to understand way of relating to what we're talking about. So before the empire, um, Punjab was a land of living science, of consciousness before the British came in. And Punjab was a land of mystics, a land of lovers, a land of visionaries. And you can see this in all the incredible cultural heritage that comes from that part of the world. So the mystics were those who experienced the sacred, not just believing in it. And so Guru Nanak revealed a way that is based on consciousness, not creed. He taught that truth isn't something to be told, to be learned, but truth is something to be realized, something that isn't preached, but something that is lived. So he revealed really to the world a science of consciousness and not a belief system, which is really what a religion is. So religion produces followers, right? And Gurmat produces mystics who are also known by the term Gurmukhs, but there are other terms which I will also share with you in this presentation. So the mystic in Gurmat is not someone who believes, but someone who has seen, someone who's had the darshan, someone who has experienced, right? So the difference is that you can believe the flame is warm and the flame is hot, and you can write a PhD on the flame, but if you never put your finger in the fire, how will you know the experience of heat? And that's what it means that someone who has seen, someone who has experienced that burning is the only one who can speak and talk about that. So this isn't about conversion to a particular way of thinking. This is simply experiential. So if you put your hand in the fire, I put my hand in the fire, and we are able to agree on the experience of what it means to burn. So unlike finding God in temples and mosques and scriptures and books, etc., Guru Nanak demonstrated that it was easier and far more accessible without the gatekeepers to access divinity through the divine hukam, which is the unfolding consciousness in motion, unfolding in the present moment, which is intelligent, which is methodological, which has a process, which goes through a development, and it's always restoring balance, right? So this was our native worldview, experiential, participatory in the experience of the whole and in this moment of now. So Guru Nanak's mystic is not separated from the world, but lives in hukam, as Nam through awareness, free from duality of good and bad, free from duality between the religious and the profane, free from duality in terms of black, white, this, that, believers, non-believers. Really, it was about being awake while alive. And when we say being awake, awake from what? And really, this is where it's all based on, which is effectively to awaken from your conditioned sense of self. And hopefully I will explore that in the next slide. So the mind is colonized, and if we listen to Guru Ramdas declares that the mind, when you are born, the mind is not developed. The mind needs to be developed, and the mind is developed through conditioning. So when you're born, ho which aya, ho which gaya, ho which jamya, ho which mua, ho is simply separation, simply the illusion of separation. And through giving an individual a name and self-referencing, we create the मैं. So ho मैं becomes this self-referencing process of referring everything to yourself through an identity, through the lens of the identity. And this lens of the identity is cultivated very, very quickly. And the greatest weapon that was used against the mystics was language. So this conditioning happens through language. The moment we create a prison of language, you are unable to think outside that prison. So if I was to ask you, think in a language that you have never heard of, or create a sound that you have never heard, you will find that it is hard pressed to. You can only think in the language that you have been accustomed to. Through languages, it is easy to then create worldviews, that there's a thing called God. And once you have a thing called God, then you can actually place that God somewhere. Gurmat is clear. Man tu jyot swaroop apna mool pachan. You are the embodiment of it. The wave is never separated from the ocean. And therefore, you are never separated. It's simply recognizing that. However, the moment you create a worldview and you place that worldview in a way, in a dualistic framework, then God becomes the other. And therefore, Mool Mantra was then translated by the likes of Ernest Trump into Ik Ongkaar, meaning there is one God. When you actually go through the Mool Mantra, you will be hard pressed to find the word God in there. Mool Mantra is the experiential process that can be subjectively verified of the nature of existence. So in order to know the ultimate, you can only enter through the door of the immediate. And the door of the immediate is the unfolding Mool Mantra in the present moment. And then through the worldviews, it's easy to then enforce psychological separations, you and me. So this was done through the census, where the Sikh had to identify himself as a Sikh or herself. The Muslim had to identify themselves as a Muslim or a Muslim, and the Hindu and various other categories of that and subcategories of each one of those. And through the census, and through categorization, these differences were created. Ken Wilber, in one of his books, states that when Adam and Eve were first, according to that particular worldview, were in the given the life on paradise or in paradise, and then excluded out of paradise, the first job Adam had was classification, which was start naming things and categorizing them. And the moment you name and categorize something, you create the division. The stronger the categorization, the harder the boundary. The harder the boundary, the greater the conflict. This is how the enforced psychological separation takes place. And then this is obviously founded upon beliefs. The belief of a heaven, the belief of a hell, the belief of doing penance, the belief of if you pray this many times, then this is the reward you will get. These are all belief systems, right? And we've seen these belief systems being carried out. Just look at what happening in the Middle East. The carnage and the genocide that's been happening on there is simply based on religious beliefs. It is a nation that was created on religious ideology, and that religious ideology has been used in order to propagate its agenda, and that is for the whole world to witness the barbarism that's going on there to this day. So this then creates your religions, and then through your religions, this is reinforced, maintained, and then just perpetuated through schooling. Remember, it's the word school. And if anyone knows what is a school, it's a school of fish. What that means is that everyone thinks alike. Everyone swims in the same direction. It's not education. Education is to bring out something new. So you are able to think. This isn't able to think. This is simply regurgitating what you have been told to think. And this then becomes the framework of your society. We just saw that just a few years ago, even with the COVID crisis, that, the moment one is schooled into a particular worldview, then you had the pros and the anti, and this becomes then the conflict. Yeah, so it's division, divide and rule has always been the strategy that's been used. So through this conditioning, one creates the identity, and identity here is Hankar. And Hankar is always changing, it's never static, it's always changing, as is Home, it's always self-referring and it's changing. All of this combined together basically enforces a particular worldview in which you are fused with the content of your mind, and Gurmat defines this as a manmukh. You may be religious, you may be able to go to your temples and your mosques and your gurdwaras and do X, Y, and Z, but the reality is that if you are fused with the content of your mind, your beliefs, your opinions, your education, and exercise this through a psychological separation, then really, from a Gurma point of view, this is nothing different than a Manmukh. And this Manmukh then is someone who's demystified. Yeah, life becomes mundane, it's ordinary, nothing is exceptional, nothing is awe-inspiring, nothing is vismad. Yeah, and that can, once you do that, then you become fused with religious ideologies, political ideologies, belief-based understandings, knowledge over experience. So first, remember, in one of the Abrahamic, first there was the word, and the word was God. So what happens is language and words become more important, and in fact stump the authority of experience. So in other words, your experience doesn't matter. What matters is what the language or the word is saying. So you can understand how experience was um, once once engagement with experience and verification of experience was replaced by simply words, books, and ideas, that it's not your experience that counts, it's what the words and the books are telling you. That's what really counts. So you can see how the mind was colonized. A child is born, and we always say the word masti karde, bacche masti karde. Children are doing masti. And if you speak to anyone who has had any interaction with the mystics of any Eastern culture, one of the words they used is e bande mastya. These individuals are must. Masti, must. Now, what does that mean? That simply means they are carefree. They are not bound by your identity. And a child, certainly till the age of about 4 or 5, is engaged in this carefree innocence. And the child doesn't know innocence, yet it is innocent in its behavior, etc. A mystic learns innocence, but from a very different perspective, going through the unlearning process, as the Sufis say, yeah, in order to practice true spiritual insight, one needs to learn by unlearning what they've learned. And this is really what the path of a mystic is. So, let's move on to what is mysticism here. So we'll just explore this in our. So in essence, mysticism is direct lived experience of reality. And reality, going back to the Mool Mantra, Ik Ongkaar, this present moment, which is presence. Yeah, it's not a belief, it's not an opinion, it's not an idea. It's the realization that all that there is this. Tu hi tu, tu hi tu, tu hi tu, but not as an idea, not as an idea. Oh, no, no, no. As an experience indeed. So it's not a theory, it's not a religion, it's not a philosophy. It's a state in which the knower, the knowing, and the known dissolve into one one non-dual unified experience. Let's just call it that. It's the inner science of becoming the truth that one seeks. The funny thing is, the seeker himself is what the seeker is seeking. Yeah. So it's finding yourself. Yeah. Self-realization. So the essence of mysticism is an intuitive feeling of insight, its source, basis, an immediate awareness of spiritual principles. An immediate, not an understanding, not a learning, but an immediate insight and awareness of spiritual principles. And this aligns us with life, with the present moment, with the universe, with the unfolding, resulting in an experience that is direct, it is unified, and there is a sacredness to this experience. And the sacredness is not external, it is you. You are that which you are seeking. It's simply the reawakening of the whole self and personality of the mystic into the supreme sacred sense of self now. The word mystic actually comes from a Greek word which is Mayan, right? Meaning to close eyes and lips, to turn inwards, to experience the ineffable directly. The ineffable means that which cannot be described. In other words, the mystic stops talking about God and begins to experience what we would call God essence, existence, sacredness, etc. Transcending really rituals, and learning, living in this kind of living, unfolding experience of now. It's and in this unfolding experience, it is grounded in silence and stillness. Even in the middle of a supermarket, it is grounded in silence and stillness, the space where truth is not said, but it is known. And this truth isn't the same kind of understanding of truth that we have. The experience of truth is very different from the understanding of truth itself. And so the path of a mystic is rather simple, but radical. It's simple and radical. And although there are other elements that I can add to it, but let me just go through some of them. First, silence. Silencing the noise, sun samad. And this can only be experienced by Khoj, by going within and recognizing, as we do with many of our teachings here, and particularly through Gurmat therapy, where individuals are taught meditation practices and understandings which they perform by themselves in their own space. And we have now maybe 30 or 40 master's dissertations which all demonstrate how individuals are able to access this silence and stillness within themselves. The other is observing the self. And to observe the self, the methodology self-inquiry is called Khoj. And Khoj is a process. We begins with the breath, where we begin to notice the breath and the flow of the breath in the present moment, and then slowly, slowly through guided awareness, and through guidance, one is able to then move deeper and deeper into themselves, moving from the body, the sensations of the body, into their mental space, and then moving beyond the thoughts into the emotional content, and then moving beyond the content of the emotions into a space that is awareness, but it is grounded in stillness and in silence. And this is where presence is now recognized and felt. Simran, no longer just a label and repetition of a word, but actually enabling one to recognize, to feel, to experience presence for what it is. And through this presence, and being grounded in the moment of now, what happens is we move from observing hukam to aligning with the unfolding of this present moment. And this alignment in the present moment is the catalyst of your transpersonal growth, or what we would call your spiritual awakening, moving beyond the conditioned sense of self. And that becomes your embodied resonance, which is Nam. Nam is no longer a label, no longer repetition, it's your lived experience. Each step is an inward movement, yeah, from a doing space, moving slowly, slowly, slowly into a being space, from separation into this unified space. And in silence, everything is unified. In stillness, everything is unified. So mysticism is not about escaping life, but about seeing life clearly for what it truly is, the play of consciousness in motion. It's experiential, it's not conceptual. The mystic does not think about the truth, they taste it. They don't repeat the word Nam, they become its vibration. And they don't worship presence, they are presence. And that presence is felt, it's radiated from the heart itself. The heart's electromagnetic field strengthens. It allows individuals to feel the presence of silence, not because the individual is a saint or anything of that nature. On the contrary, when you become silent, then those around you experience the silence within you. But when you are noisy, when you are engaged in your thoughts, when you are particularly in thoughts of hatred or fear, etc., then your EM field, your aura, all of these bioresonance, all of these are impacted to the point that they are measurably impacted. So in mysticism, words are like maps, useful until you arrive. And what do I mean by that? It's through direct awareness, darshan, anupov, sun, samadh. These are words until you arrive there and you realize that the word was simply a finger pointing towards the moon and not the moon itself. And when you get to the moon, metaphorically speaking, you're able to experience it for what it is. So their way of knowing begins where belief ends. Belief is always second hand. It's carbon copy. Yeah. It's, I believe this because you believe this. Yeah. It belongs to the mind. Belief is just accumulated garbage from other people. It's never yours. Your experience is yours, but beliefs are always borrowed, and they're never original. They're always borrowed. Mysticism is first hand. It's putting your hand in the fire. It belongs to consciousness. Yeah. And we can look at this in two ways, right? We can kind of position the believer's worldview and a mystic worldview. One believes in truth, the other one becomes truth. One follows doctrine, one follows awareness. One obeys commandments, the other aligned with the commandment, which is the present moment unfolding, which is hukam. One seeks approval, whether I take Amrit or whether I've done enough Japji Sahibs or whether I've done this or not eaten that or whatever the kind of restrictions are, in order to get the approval from some external deity or from some community or some belonging. Yeah. Whereas the mystic dwells in presence, there is nothing to seek approval. The very fact that you're alive, the very fact that you are able to access the moment of now, the very fact that you have awareness of this is the fact that you've been approved. One speaks of God, the other one knows of God and is the expression of God. Yeah, experiences this unfolding, the happening, just like the wave is a happening on the ocean, on the surface of the ocean. So are you, and so am I. And as we begin to experience this, we begin to recognize our unified wholeness with the ocean and the wave. One repeats, the other one realizes, one performs, the other one dissolves. So you can see that there are some significant contrasts between the believer and the mystic. So let's look at now the psychology of a mystic. So the psychology or psychologically, the mystic lives from the heart. It's heart-centered, hirda. Now, there is the physical heart, which is obviously everyone knows of that. But behind the physical heart, 3 ribs up, 1 inch in on the right-hand side, there is this energetic space which is known as hirda. And Hirda is really a profound location where awareness can rest, and that in itself allows you to access heart intelligence, heart intuition, to mention but a few. They function through intuition, direct perception, and empathy, which is very deep. However, they are also uh, beparwa, meaning they are carefree. So while you might have empathy, but with the empathy arises also a level of um, being carefree, meaning not being attached to the outcome. Mind is always open but silent. Emotions flow, so they're not possessed. You don't become infused with your emotion. You don't become wrapped up in your emotion. And the body itself, life itself, is sacred. The breath becomes your sacred prayer. The breath, this very breath that you're taking right now, is a once in a lifetime event. It'll never happen again. And once we begin to see it for what it is, we begin to have some reverence, some respect, and then your pavan does become your guru. No longer living through thought, but living through being, just as we mentioned with the breath. And the identity is fluid, it's not fixed, it's transparent. You're nobody, but you're everything, and you're everyone. You're not good in the moral sense because morality comes from society. This is an innate ontological space where the heart knows what is right and what is wrong. It's authentic. Here, truth arises not from commandments, but from coherence with hukam, alignment with hukam. So, within Gurmat, where does mysticism fit in? Well, you will be surprised to know Gurmat is seeped in mysticism. That's all Gurmat is. Gurmat is not a religion, it is not religiosity, it is not a belief system, it's not an opinion, it is the land and the life of a mystic. The land of the mystic, meaning the body itself, is your land of mystery and awe and vismar, and your way of being is that which is a state of being rather than a state of doing. There is a fluidity in it. It's the natural state where home, separation, dissolves, becomes transparent. Home bujje, ta dar sujje. Guru Nanak is clear. Until you recognize the nature of your home, this ain't going to work. This is not going to work. And this is where Gurmat therapy in particular excels, because it allows you systematically to begin to recognize your own internal mechanism, and through recognizing your own internal mechanism and recording this mechanism over a period of time, you yourself, not through anyone else, you yourself become your own master. In other words, you begin to recognize your egoic patterns, and by recognizing a pattern, you step out of the pattern. This is what it means. Home bujje, dada sujje. So, as I've said, Nanak revealed a science of consciousness, not a creed. Man tu jot swarup, apna mool pachan, recognize that you are the source. You are the source, because it is the man. It is the mind that needs to recognize itself, not someone else that's going to come and tell you, oh, for you are God. Did you know Guru Nanak told you that you are God? Yes, of course. That's great. It's really good for your ego to be told that. But no, on the contrary, it is through the recognition of this that a humility will arise. Not that you're able to proclaim that you and God are the same. No, no, on the contrary. The humility is such and so deep that the mouth and the lips close, and the ineffable can only be expressed through an expression and not through any words, because even to utter a word is to try and contain that which is uncontainable. This is the entire journey of the mystic, to move from ignorance to one's nature of direct recognition of oneself as light or consciousness, not a religion but a realization. It's not a priest or a believer. It is the one that becomes. It is the one that perceives. It is the one that experiences. While the priest performs, the mystic perceives. The believer repeats, the mystic realizes. The religious mind seeks reward. The mystic seeks reality and self. And you can only know yourself by recognizing what you are not. Neti, neti, neti. Not this, not this, not this. In Gurbani, such a person, there are many, many different terms. Now, Gurmat has a number of terms that identify states of mysticism. And each one of these states of mysticism has different qualities, just as every mountain has its own unique peak. A mystic has their own unique peak. No two mystics are the same, just like no two mountaintops are the same. Each mountain has its own peak. Each mystic has his or her own peak. So let's just compare here, have a look at the mystic and the colonizer. I think I've spelled that right. Right? The colonizer could not understand the mystic because he lived in a dualistic paradigm, meaning the colonizer lives in this dualistic paradigm, which is good and evil, religious and non-religious, believers and non-believers, etc. So they believe they live in this dualistic paradigm. Remember, right at the start, I was talking how you are conditioned into through language, etc., and worldviews. Well, this is how the colonizer, unfortunately, this is unfortunately the sadness of a colonizer, that they've never been introduced to non-duality. They have always lived in and seeped in a social order which is pretty much dominated by dualism. He believes in the God above, man below. Yeah. He valued belief over being, words over silence, conversion over consciousness. And so when such a mind, when these minds actually came across Guru Nanak's mysticism, not just Guru Nanak's mysticism, when in fact any religious dualistic kind of framework comes across a mystic, there is a violent reaction, always a violent reaction, because the believer, the one with the opinionated worldview, engaged in their content of their mind, they will always react violently to a mystic, always react violently. They will, so those who are civilized, a civilized culture, will place a mystic in a way that they are able to worship them. Those who are uncivilized, they will always persecute their mystics. And history, I will go through it in a few moments, history will demonstrate that every time a mystic has shown his or herself in the essence of that, they have always been persecuted by society, by the religious, and by general power structures. So mysticism was colonized into a religion. The mystic's direct knowing was replaced by dogma. Experience was replaced by explanation. And this is where Kojis became Kathavachiks. Yeah, the ones who needed to go in started producing information outwards to let the world know this is what it's about, this is what it's about. So the Koji became the Kathavachik. The Gyani, and if you were to look at the translation and the definition of a Gyani, what is a Gyani? In Gurmat, in Gurbani, it says Gyani is the one who is self-realized. So the Jnani became a Granthi, and the Granthi is a reciter of the words. Yeah. And therefore, you will find that as a result of this, the whole process went from an inner space to an external performance. And this is where then the word Sikhism originates from. Yeah, and this word Sikhism originates in, or it is the colonized word. It's the one to let you know if you relate to this word Sikhism, Buddhism, or Hinduism, any of the shamanism, any of these words, then you are relating to it as a colonized prisoner. The mystic and the decolonized human. The mystic is the most decolonized human being, which is why they have always been a threat to external authority, always been a threat to it. Why? Because they're not colonized. They don't need to believe this nonsense. They know truth to be what truth is. They don't need institutions. They don't need middlemen or middle women. Their authority is presence and being itself, not the word, not a particular scripture, not a particular individual. They don't need a pope. They don't need a Jnani. They don't need a Granthi. They don't need a mullah. They don't need any of this stuff. They know it for themselves. Direct trust in consciousness. It's not a rebellion, it's a remembrance. It restores our innate coherence. And here, coherence is on a different level. Again, with Gurmat therapy, one is able to recognize the coherence is to do with the mind, the breath, the heart, physiology. And through those four aligned components, one is able to then catalyze transpersonal growth, or what you'd call spiritual health or spiritual growth. So, if we were to look at how the mystics have been treated, whether it is Christianity, Islam, or Sikh, or any of the others, you will find it's always been the same. It's always. For example, within Christianity, St. George of Cross, I think it was, and Teresa of Avila were both imprisoned by the church for their inner experience. Muslim mystics such as, and through the Islam particularly, so within Islam, you have Wahhabi Islam, which is exoteric, and then you have Sufi, yeah, the likes of Baba Farid, the likes of Kabir, the likes of Rumi, right? And they sought direct experience of Allah through dhikr, which is love, remembrance, and fana. Yeah, the annihilation of the sense, the egoic sense of self. They taught that divine presence resides in every heart, not limited to mosques, believers, rituals. So as a result, if you look at Mansur al-Haqqa, Ana al-Haq, I think is what he said, I am the truth. For uttering this, he was flogged, he was mutilated, his hands were cut off, and he was executed in Baghdad. As was Shuravadi, I think he was the name, the philosopher, mystic of illumination. He was executed, simply called a heretic in Aleppo. And then you have others like Rabia of Basri were ridiculed. She was a woman. She was ridiculed and ostracized for teaching love over fear. So the Sufis have been, again, exemplified, the Sufi mystics, through the persecution. And the Sikhs haven't had any easier ride. Just look at Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Just look at Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. Just look at what was done to Guru Gobind Singh Ji Sahibzade. Just look at that. The mystics have always been a thorn in the side of the religious and the power mongers. And the mystic lineage which has lived through the Sant Parampara, the Sant lineage, the Sant traditions, from Baba Siri Chand to Baba Puran Singh to Bhai Gurdas Ji to Bhagat Ravidas to Bhagat Farid, right down all the way to Baba Vadpag Singh, to the modern ones, Baba Ishar Singh, Sant Atar Singh, many mystics Many mystics, they've always been systematically marginalized. Particularly those that embody direct awareness have been replaced by granthis, gyanis, and pracharaks, again demonstrating the problem the mystics create for the structures of control and authority. So, if we were to look within the Gurmat worldview, well, we've got many terms. We've got Gurmukh, Brahmgyani, Sant, Bhagat, Dhyani, Avahut, Siddh, Sevak, Gyani, and then Saj, Vastavala, many different terms to demonstrate what it means to be a mystic. And there are different qualities. I've just mentioned one just as a comparison. And you will notice the English term parallels are very limited and very difficult to actually recognize what is it that they're trying to say. So within Gurmat, you will find that each one of them, whether it's Bhagats, whether it's Sants, whether it's Brahmgyani, they all have huge levels of a significant number of qualities that have identified within them. Sukhmani Sahib, for example, whether you look at the Aspadis of the Sant or the Aspadis of Brahmgyani, will provide you with that kind of information. What I'm really trying to explore here, or should I say share here, is that there is nothing else but mystics and mysticism from a Gurmat perspective. Anything other than that can't be called Gurmat. So what does it mean to live in the way of a mystic? Well, to live as a mystic is to first experience all as divine movement, consciousness in this present moment. Now, you can only do that if you first experience the moment of now unfolding Ongkaar, start, middle, end, start, middle, end, start, middle, end. And that can only come through Dhyan and Khoj. Yeah, Dhyan meaning awareness, making sure that your awareness is embedded in the present moment, and through the unfolding of the present moment, we begin to recognize the unfolding of the hukam, and this hukam is this divine movement of consciousness. There is no ownership. It is accessible to all. It is embodied and grounded in stillness, in silence. And it serves without separation. So when we talk about selfless service, this we've kind of created it into, we are the do-gooders and we are helping those who are less fortunate. On the contrary, here seva becomes non-separation. Do what needs to be done. Love without identity. So it's a lovingness. It's not love towards a particular thing. Oh, I love this and I love that. It is lovingness. Why? Because existence itself is karuna. The existence itself is the embodiment of compassion, not towards anything, but just inherently in the moment of now. So within Gurmat, it's very simple that Bhagat Sada Vigas Sunye Doop Paap Ka Nas. Yeah, that through this awareness, cultivating of this awareness in the present moment, the sacredness is realized. It is therefore, when it calls bliss, it's not necessarily bliss, it's non-dualism. Yeah, in non-dualism, there is no hate, there is no love, or fear, should I say, because fear is the opposite of hate. And it is a moment that is experienced in which has an experience of sweetness and appreciation. Those are the two words I would use. So, in order for us to recognize where we are within this context of what it is to be a mystic, a mysticism, so ask yourself these questions: do I repeat or do I realize? Am I simply regurgitating the same information, the same words over and over again? Do I even take the moment to realize what they're telling me? So when Nanak talks about Manjite Jagjit, conquer the mind to conquer the world, How can you conquer the mind if you don't know what the mind is? And how can you know the mind if there is no inner inquiry? And how can there be no inner, how can there be inner inquiry without guidance, instructions? See where I'm going with this? Do I perform or do I perceive? Ask yourself the question. Do I seek belief, or is me being alive in the moment of now enough? Is it enough? Do I quote or do I live it? And this is really very interesting. Whenever you will hear many people will, whether it's Bible bashers or anything else, you will find that they will quote scripture in order to put you in your place. Yeah, in order to validate their thinking. So this quotation of wisdom and scripture, in order to demonstrate how much you know, is simply nothing more than an ego trip. Yeah, it just reinforces the whole superiority and division, and therefore is quite contrary to what a mystic is. And a mystic is the one who lives the wisdom. So where does the colonizer still speak through me? Well, those who are unable to speak Punjabi, for example, you will find that are unable to read Gurmukhi and understand it with its original linguistic meanings, um, will have difficulty. Will have difficulty. Even me telling you and speaking about this, I am using the colonizer's language, but I am trying to use the prison that's in front of me in order to undo it. Right? So remember that with a mystic, the way to recognize is you will always find, as I've said earlier on, those who are threatened by a mystic or mysticism will always throw dirt as the mystic and the mysticism. And this can come in many ways. You are a derewala, you're a baba, you're creating a cult, you are misleading people from the path. Oh, that was a good one. And so the other such terms. And those are just language, but it actually goes, as I demonstrated earlier on, it actually goes into violence. It actually goes into destroying the mystic. Why? Because the mystic is a mirror to show you the falseness that you live in. And no one wants to look at the ugly falseness that they have and that they are. So what do? They break the mirror. So how do we reclaim the language of being? How do we reclaim this? Well, um, God, well, that's a word that needs to be dropped. And rather than this term, it is about consciousness. It is about infinite. It is about sacredness in the consciousness. Making sure that word consciousness isn't just secularized and made into this non-sacred word that points towards something. No, within Gurmat, it is sacred. It is profoundly sacred, and it is the presence. Prayer is no longer a prayer. I mean, you must have heard, shabads referred to as hymns. They're not hymns. They're not hymns. They are the actual direct experience of the mystics recorded in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji or Dasambani or Sarblo or some of the other texts as well. So when we talk about Simran, it is about being continuously present. That's all it is. When in Gurbani talks about 24/7, be in Naam, what that means simply is execute, cultivate present moment presence in your everyday activities, whether you're sitting, whether you're standing, whatever you're doing, whether you're eating, whether you're laughing, whether you're crying, become present to the presence. It's no longer about faith. Anyone who talks about Gurmat as a faith-based thing, or anyone who's involved in this interfaith stuff, Gurmat and Sikhi is not to do with faith. Sikhism is to do with faith because it's a religion and it's a colonized version of a mystical way of being. So, yep, they can have faith because they have a belief system. But the reality is we have Vishwas, we have Parosa, we know inner certainty inner certainty that is born of experience. I have experienced so many times stillness and silence. I don't need anyone to tell me what Sun Samadhi is because I know what it to be. That's what I mean with this. It's no longer salvation, it's mukti. What does that mean? That means freeing yourself from your egoic content. Rather than the ego leading you, it is about awareness being in control such that the ego becomes a tool rather than the ego becoming your forefront, your persona. And therefore this Jivan Mukti is about being released from the bondage of your belief systems, the bondage of your linguistics, which is why silence and stillness become so important. Because in silence and stillness, there is no need for language. There is no need for prayer. There is no need for anything because that in itself is the prayer of being present. And rather than using words like sin, it's home, it's your egoic separation. That's all it is, you know. And sin is what takes you away from your essential self. Yeah, Swarag and Narak, two words. Nakar, Narak, Nakar, when you leave your own home, when you get involved in your thoughts, when you get involved in everything else, you desert and abandon yourself. That becomes your Narak, that becomes your hell. Swarag, to come back to your home, to come back to your inner space. That becomes your heaven. In stillness and silence is the land of the pure. And finally, it's not about laws and commandments, it's about hukam, the unfolding principle of this present moment. So, I hope it's given us some understanding of mystics and mysticism within the context of these talks that I'm doing on the colonization of the mystic and reclaiming the mystics. So if I've done anything or said anything that may have offended anyone, well, such is life. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.